Good morning, John. Good morning, Cam. A few others that are not listed. Great. Well, let's get going. It's Friday, August 16th. Happy Kwaai Day. Over to you, Myra.
Well, actually, you are first, Reza.
Kwaai updates. Look, we broke through the 600 barrier. We have a membership of over 600. In fact, I think it's a lot over 600, but Suniti, who is transferring some of the people that signed up for the beta who said they also wanted to be Kwaai members, that hasn't been added, but 600, great, pat yourself on the back. That's a fantastic goal to reach. Okay, you know, our goal for the end of the year is 1,000. I think we'll easily get that. As we grow in membership, stuff happens, stuff becomes really complex, and I'm really grateful for the help that Myra and Debbie and Suniti and the whole back office automation team provide. That's just the admin, the logistics needed to keep an organization going, to make sure all these talented folks that are joining, that they don't churn out because they get frustrated for not knowing how to contribute and not knowing how to find things. Look, we can always do better, and you can always reach me on Slack. It would be great if people were to not Slack me individually. I don't mind, but if you're asking a question of the entire community, do a bit of searching through Slack. Find the work group that you think might have the group of folks that are knowledgeable and would be able to answer that question. I'm happy to steer you, but there are other people that can steer you. Find out who are the folks. Myra knows her way around Kwaai. Thank you so much, Myra. And as we grow, other things happen. Bad actors start to target us. My email is inundated with phishing attacks. You might also be getting phishing attacks where it appears like it's an email coming from me, but it's not. And it's asking for your phone number. And I'm seeing a lot of that in Kwaai. If you're in Gmail, right-click on the email, just report it as a phishing attack. I would never email you and say, hey, what's your WhatsApp details or what's your phone number? We've got sufficient communication contact information to be able to reach you. Great. Okay, look, on that note, we've got a packed lineup. Myra, talk us through the agenda.
Well, I think we need to update that slide because I don't think Richard's talking about Pi-Palooza.
Right. You're right. And I took it off, didn't I?
Did you?
Oh, yes. Oh, no, exactly. Lose that.
All right. There we go.
There we go.
Happy to riff, but I'm not sure I'm the
my
right.
mistake. Okay.
So we're going to obviously start with Richard's lightning talk. Richard, I know you had slides for me to share as well. And then after that, please let's ask questions, find out more about what Richard's doing. And then we'll follow up with work group updates and listen to our new members and then wrap up. So Richard, it's all you.
Awesome. Thank you, Myra. Thank you, Reza, for the time today. Hello, everybody. Really pleased to be able to present here, hopefully fairly briefly, and have sufficient time for a dialogue, a conversation. I've been involved with Kwaai going back, I think, 4 or 5 months now, and helping a little bit on the policy side. A little bit about me. So I'm a former longtime policy attorney at Google. I was there for over 11 years, helped start the DC office for the company back in 2006. Before that, MCI Communications for 12 years. I've always been operating at this area, this juncture of sort of law, policy, technology, and business. And since leaving Google in 2018, I was a fellow at Mozilla Foundation for 3.5 years, and then doing a variety of consulting and advising gigs along the way. That's my current posture. I have a book coming out, Reweaving the Web. So that's about all you're going to hear about it from me. You can go find me on LinkedIn. I've got a few things up there to talk more about it and information about it. Doc Searles, our very own Doc, has written a wonderful foreword to the book. I'm very appreciative of that. So thank you, Doc. I know you're on here somewhere. Anyway, let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about my conception of like what's wrong with the web. There are many things wrong with the web, but boiling it down to its essence, and then much more importantly to me, what we can do about it. And I think Kwaai, what you all are building, what we are building together as a platform, really could be a key component of the solution set to the challenges of the web. So Myra, yeah, thank you. So this is sort of the one slide I try to put together, which attempts to boil down in its essence things that much smarter people than me, Shoshana Zuboff, Cory Doctorow, Bruce Schneier, who spoke with Twist not long ago, many others have diagnosed, right? This, and I've tried to again, boil it to its essence, make it something fairly straightforward for people to understand. I call it SEAMS. So it puts together the 4 elements of what pretty much all the web platform companies and their ecosystem do, which is surveillance using devices and essentially interfaces they control, extraction, so taking personal data, from us through a variety of mechanisms, analyzing it using algorithms and now increasingly advanced generative AI platforms, and then manipulation. And when I first came up with the manipulation term 6-7 years ago, I was a little worried. It seemed a little brash, a little out there. But the more I've come to understand in that intervening time, manipulation, in fact, is exactly right. It is an attempt to influence us to do a variety of things, most of which boils down to money. But obviously, as we have seen on the web, money can translate into things like political positions, right? So it's your behaviors, it's your actions. It's not just your data is gone and somebody have access to it. They're using it in ways that are subtly, and maybe in some cases not so subtly, influencing us. And that's a problem. And in the context of AI, a much bigger problem, as these platforms and these agents and bots quickly overwhelm our fairly limited cognitive capabilities. So question is, what do we do about it? So Myra, next slide, please. I came up with this concept of GliaNet as I was leaving Google back in 2017-18. Glia is the ancient Greek word for glue. And what had occurred to me as I was in my latter years at the company, one of the interesting elements I realized was everybody was an end user. We didn't have customers. We didn't have clients. We didn't have patrons. We had individuals for whom we treated them as an end user because users have no rights. And this, as in so many cases, Doc Searles got there first, says it much better than I do. But the bottom line is we have no rights as users because that's the way the laws and regulations are written. Everything is based on one-sided terms of service that the web companies create and apply to us. We can consent, but that form of consent is really constrained for a variety of reasons, which I go into in more detail in the book and elsewhere. But we're missing some elements here. We're missing some connectivity that should drive us to want to become part of the net and an ecosystem that actually treats us as individuals, as human beings, not as mere users. So Glia had these, and you can see it on the screen there, 3 different connotations that I sort of like. One is the proverbial notion of trust is the social glue that binds us together a variety of ways. I'm a Spider-Man fan, so the mantra, with great power comes great responsibility. Those in power tend not to account for it. And that's, again, a problem we need to address. And the last is support and the glial networks in the brain. And again, I talk about this in the book. There's a fascinating backstory about neural networks versus glial networks and how the latter never get brought up, in happy hour conversations in Silicon Valley for some reason. But the glial networks support us, right? The neurons do all the work, but without the glials to be there to support it, to enhance, promote, protect all the neural networks, we can't operate the neurons in the brain. So, and there's also some other acronyms I came up with. But anyway, that's the notion of what GliaNet is. It's an attempt to think about point B, where we want to be, which is a more accountable web. And then the question is, how do we get there from here? How do we sort of create the back channeling that creates the different pathways to make that happen? So next slide, please, Mara. And so this is my approach, which is thinking among other ways, among other distinctions, thinking about it as multiple layers. You can think about these as systems, right? But there's no one solution, right? There's no one path that gets us there. It really does take an ecosystem. It takes looking at different elements that hopefully support each other, create positive feedback loops. And so I break it down into 4 structures: governance, markets, technology, public policy. The governance piece is bringing into the 21st century web the old common law notions of fiduciaries. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But having entities that operate on our behalf, that have a duty of care and loyalty towards us, much like doctors and lawyers. We have none of that on the web, and I would argue we actually are more susceptible and vulnerable on the web to a lot of the pernicious things happening there than in some cases we are with lawyers and doctors and financial advisors who do operate under those duties today. So there's that concept. Markets, I'm a markets guy, even though the web for the last 10, 20 years in my mind has sort of supplanted ordinary market behavior. We need to get back to some of the basics of having willing buyers and sellers. Technology, what I call edge tech, which is technology not in the cloud, where they control everything, including the interfaces, but technology at the edge. And we're all familiar, I think, with things like local data pods and creating a variety of decentralized web applications, things that are more at the edge of the network, which then in turn means we have more control over it. And then finally, public policy. How do we talk about this with policymakers in ways that we can create inputs and incentives that this kind of ecosystem can actually grow and flourish? Next slide, please. So this is just really breaking down the idea of a net fiduciary. I've wrote several law journal articles about this, and in fact engaged in interesting back and forth with Lena Khan, who's currently the chair of the Federal Trade Commission, on a very key point, which is there are a number of people who've said, well, we have to impose fiduciary duties on the web platform companies, right? Mark Zuckerberg has to have a duty of loyalty to me, which sounds good on paper. And there are number of authors, academics who support that. Lena Khan's response, which is one that I support as well, is forced loyalty is not loyalty. She focuses on how that could conflict with the Delaware law around fiduciary duties to shareholders, within a modern corporation. I focus more on the basic behavior, right? If it becomes a compliance headache rather than a voluntary thing that somebody sees as a true market differentiator, it's not going to work. So the concept here is we create this, and again, I'll get on this in a second, this sort of realm of entities who want to do the right thing by us, mirroring a lot of the ways that doctors and lawyers do that for us in the so-called offline world. Bring those, and there are also good lessons to learn about how it works that has some cases not worked as well. Bring those lessons to bear in the web, and then create an ecosystem. I call it a coalition of the willing. So that's the basic concept of the net fiduciary. It's also, some people call it the data fiduciary or the information fiduciary. I think of it as broader. Data and information, in some sense, are technology terms, right? Those are what the tech companies think. I think of it as our interactions, our relationships on the web. So to me, it's broader than just our data. It's our day-to-day actions, our thoughts, our behaviors, the way we interact in the world, right? So not giving in necessarily to the data concept. Instead, let's think about this in a broader sense. So next slide, please. So this, and we could talk about this for hours. This is a very quick brush job, but these are the three basic roles and functions and duties with some examples from the web that I've come up with as part of the GliaNet initiative. So, and this, in the fiduciary world, there are roughly three kinds of duties. The bottom line duty is the duty of care. And in fact, in many places, that's already a statutory requirement. In the current privacy bill pending in Washington for kids' safety, there's a duty of care, right? And it's less, there's sort of less baggage to it in terms of imposing that on companies. So many people think of that as like, that's the bottom line. There should be a do no harm standard on these entities. Here I call it the protect. It's a guardian. It's making sure that you are not in fact subject to harm. The best example is protecting clients' data, right? Don't leave your server farms wide open for people to hack into them. In fact, probably don't leave the data there at all. Let people have, data on their own that they can control that's not, again, susceptible to all these things. So that's the bottom line, protect. The next two then get into the heart of the fiduciary relationships, which is loyalty. And I break it down into two different components because there are really sort of two different ways of doing it. The middle tier there is what I call fidelity. And that is the notion that you're not supposed to have any conflicts of interest or duties. So if I go to my doctor, they're supposed to prescribe for me the medication that works best for me, not because they got a kickback from the pharmaceutical company, right? Similar concept here. If I see an ad or I interact with something on the web, it should be because it's for me, intended for me, and not because somebody else is getting a benefit at my expense. So a classic case here, I think on the web, is mediating news feeds. So getting news by intermediaries like middleware companies who give me the news because it's what they think I want because I'm involved in that process in some way, not because it's what they claim that I should want. So that's that middle tier. The highest tier, the most difficult, but also to me the most rewarding, is this idea of promoting my best interests, right? And so that is where you're an actual advocate on behalf of the individual. That is true loyalty. the best case here, and again, Doc and Joyce Searles got here first, something that's been called intent cast shopping, right? So why can't I have, as Joyce would say, why can't I have my own shopping cart online? Why can't I take that to every store? Why can't I have totally protected, privacy shield around my financial information, my wants and needs? I should be able to project that. They should come to me, right? And behind a synonymous shield, for example, they should come to me and I should control that experience. That's an example of my best interest promoting me in the web, not just sort of, mediating, but really out there, fully in control of myself. And then edge take capabilities, coming back to Kwaai, edge take capabilities like authentic, what I call authentic personal AI agents, in combination with these kinds of net fiduciaries and other intermediaries. That's a powerful combination, right? It's governance plus tech, really, I think, is what works well there. Here's the next slide. Net fiduciary and that personal AI agent working together. And again, as a lawyer, I have a tendency to say, technology is awesome, but if you don't have that connected in some way with the human governance element, then I think it's an incomplete picture. A good example of that is blockchain. I'm not a big fan of cryptocurrencies, et cetera. I'm a big fan of NFTs, right? Putting aside the crazy yacht monkey stuff, a non-fungible token is a really interesting way of, for example, encapsulating my data access rights and sharing that on my basis with other people using blockchain technology is cool. When people say, oh, yeah, it's a trustless trust environment, I sort of pull back a bit, saying, no. There has to be human trust somewhere in the loop. I can't just have a technology presented to me and someone claims, yeah, you just trust it because it comes out of the box ready to go. No, it doesn't work that way. I need to know there's a human somewhere in the background who's in fact operating in ways that I feel comfortable with, that they're doing on my behalf. Next slide. So, and this gets into more detail we can talk about separately, but this is a paper I came up with this past year. It's also reflected in the book. People talk about agents. So what is an agent? And this is not a new thing, right? There's basically two elements to being an agent. One is making decisions on my behalf. Making decisions. The second is doing it on my behalf or on behalf of a particular individual. And so those are two different things. So oftentimes, and I just dissect these papers, OpenAI came out with a paper late last year on what they call agenticity, which is the degree, it's basically the ability, the measure of capability of a particular AI bot or agent, right? How advanced it is in terms of reflecting the goals, the environment, and all that kind of good stuff. That's important, absolutely. But the second piece tends to get missed, which is doing it on my behalf. So in my paper, I make a modest suggestion that thinking about what I call agentiality, maybe it's crazy to have another agent form, but I was trying to find a way to talk about this separate dimension, a measure of relationship, right? How closely entwined is this agent, supposed agent in the world, vis-a-vis me and my aspirations? And then Bruce Schneier, who spoke with us not long ago here, talks about beware of the double agent. And that's exactly what we're trying to avoid, right? Agents that operate for me, not hiding behind the screen of, let's say, the Microsoft Copilot saying, oh, yeah, we're with you, we're 100%, we're all in sync, when in fact we're not. And here's how these two dimensions work together. Those of you who are fans of Clippy going back in the day, Clippy was great because he was completely irrelevant and mostly just annoying, right? So he did nothing and he had no agency on our behalf. Obviously, we're no longer in Clippy world, move us forward 20, 25 years. But as we move forward in capabilities, my thesis is we should also be moving ahead in terms of the relationships, right? That the level of agency in terms of agentiality, again, to coin the phrase, should be going up as this power moves on. Next slide. So this comes down to sort of the last bit here, which is how do I take this going forward? How do I move with this into the real world? And again, the book touches on this, but I have decided to create a coalition of the willing. And those Donald Rumsfeld fans, I'm not talking about his particular one in Iraq. I'm talking about an actual alliance of companies who want to work together, who see that this is a market differentiator, right? To build out what it means to be a fiduciary in the world, best practices, codes of conduct, maybe a licensing and certification regime. Maybe it becomes a profession unto itself. In California, we have personal fiduciaries. We have companies, we have entities and individuals who work on behalf of folks who have cognitive challenges, the elderly, for example, work on their finances, work on their health care. That's a known profession, certified, licensed by the state of California. Thousands and thousands of people do that. Maybe that's a model we can look to say we need a similar thing. When we're on the web, my suggestion is we are all cognitively challenged because of what the web companies throw at us with the seam cycle. So the coalition here, we're just getting started. Our first meeting is next week. I'm hoping Kwaai would become a member. That would be awesome. They've got 15 companies signed up so far. But the idea is, again, using the market approach, voluntary, people coming in to work together, collaborating on what this looks like, the business models, the technologies, the policies around that. Next slide. This is just a statement of principles. A lot of words. It basically says, yeah, seams exists. We don't like it. We wanted to work on more ethical approaches, using fiduciary law, the common law going back hundreds of years in many jurisdictions, as the base point from which to have these conversations. Commit to exploring this, collaborating with other companies and other stakeholders here, and again, a number of things to be done there, professional code of conduct and practices, etc. Next slide. And then this is just proposed activities. And again, it's more or less the same thing. So I'll move past this. One more slide then. And the proposed structure, no dues. Idea is let's keep the front end very simple. Anybody who wants to join, money should not be a concern as long as you agree with the statement of principles and you work together with others. It's going to be a nonprofit corporation under Delaware law. The verbiage is all there. A 501c6, which is the notion of under the IRS code. So that's basically, it's a business league or board of trade of commercial entities. And we can develop some of the other governance structures like a board, executive committee, all that kind of good stuff later on. That's basically it. So I'm sorry if I went a few minutes over, but that's what I've been working on today, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Richard, thanks so much. If you've got questions for Richard, put your hands up. But Richard, thanks, and thanks for giving us an opportunity to write a few sentences about Kwaai in your upcoming book. That was
yes, I should have mentioned that. Reza was kind enough to provide a supportive quote, and certainly, yeah, Kwaai deserves its chunk of one of the chapters talking about AI as a solution set here under the right governance structures.
So there are a number of organizations that are in sort of the AI for good space. And I think the way that we gain critical mass and we become a credible opposition to the monopolizing forces is by joining forces, is by having conversations like this to explore how are we in fact aligned and speak in one voice where we can.
Yeah, I must say the lightning talk guests, I don't know where they found that photo of me in London, like, I don't know, 40 years ago. I don't look, that's me in law school, not me now for sure. But I appreciate it. The investigation that came up with that particular photo.
Thanks, Myra. Myra did some detective work.
Yes, I did. I don't know. I kind of like to add a little fun to this part.
Yeah.
Take out old pictures.
Yeah.
Which college?
Yeah.
Which college did you study at?
I went to James Madison University in Harrisonburg, Virginia, the turkey capital of the world, and then I went to Georgetown for law school.
But then in London, were you studying?
I was just
you're just a tourist there. Okay, in Carnaby Street, of course.
Of course.
Okay.
There's a big pint of beer somewhere right below where the screen got cut off there. Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Questions for Richard? Put your hands up, and we can take those.
Yeah, I can't see, so I guess if somebody can tell me who might be.
Yeah, Richard, you've got a next week. You've got the inaugural meeting. Maybe put a link in the chat. Nicole's got her hand raised.
Yes. Hey, Nicole.
Hi, Richard. Love your presentation. Really innovative look on a very common problem I think everybody's kind of looking at right now. But you know what they say about perspectives. You kind of have to have a lot to see the whole picture. So this is awesome. On that note, I kind of wanted to ask, what different duties of care or different applications do you see this actually being used for? Like, is this something you're just going to apply to the actual ecosystem of AI and network interactions and relationships, as you say? Or do you think we could even see this reflected in the assistants themselves?
Yeah, great question. And this is also, interestingly, the notion of fiduciary duties, the concern, the primary concern that's been animating me is something different from what the web companies have, which is a higher duty towards us as the individuals. As we have AI agents, and I think you and I talked about this the other day, Nicole, as with AI agents that sort of, they elevate their autonomy, right? They gain more power and control in the environment. right? How do you create and enforce fiduciary terms between you and the agent, right? We're getting into Asimov's 3 laws and all that kind of good stuff, right? The duty of care, don't harm me. Well, how do you define harm? How do you encode that? How do you make sure it's enforced, on a daily basis? How do you make sure it can't be overridden by a bad bot, or even the bot itself that becomes self-aware and says, no, I know better than you do. So those are all fascinating questions. I like to say I have every answer laid out, and just go buy my book, but no, I don't. But that's, I think, where Kwaai and this community, I think, is so valuable, because we do have 600 people and counting as part of this, bringing a vast array of perspectives from a variety of different sectors and ways of thinking about ethics and how to apply them in the world. So it's obviously it's an ongoing process, but I think those are the right kinds of questions. But I don't really think, again, I don't think Mark Zuckerberg is particularly waking up every morning and that's the first thing in his mind. So that's where we have to step into the chasm there that's been created by these companies, not necessarily thinking as hard about it as they should be.
Absolutely. I'm
John?
excited to explore that further.
Cool. Sounds good.
Thanks, Nicole. John's got his hands up.
Yeah. Hey, John.
Hey, Richard. Yeah, no, I love your presentation, and then we definitely have a lot to do in the policy front to figure out how to prevent a Web 2 like Moloch creating beast that is big tech nowadays.
Right.
How do you, how do you include? I didn't see the entire presentation. I saw most of it. How do you include censorship and interoperability? And in your, perspective, because to me, the scariest thing about big tech is censorship, Leviathan, it's going to go, you know what I mean?
Totally. So the paper I wrote that should be published a little later this year out of University of Colorado, the Tech Law Journal, is on, so I had the 2 dimensions of agency, right? So the one is capabilities. And I say you can't have capabilities that really operate on our behalf unless you have AI interoperability, right? We have interop in certain ways. We all know on the web, email, et cetera. We have no way for right now these AI systems, whether they're bot to bot or it's bot to the platform, right? What I call vertical and horizontal. Neither one is there. There are folks like IEEE, IATF have been looking at different ways of making that happen, and there's some progress on the standards front. But as I talk about in the paper, standards are great and open standards are better, but if they're not adopted in the environment, then that's a problem. So that could be a place, for example, where public policy comes in, tells the platform companies, guess what? You got to interoperate. You have to allow people to have their AIs, talk to your AIs, maybe query them, challenge them when they're doing things that they're not happy about. So it becomes a real 2-way conversation. And then to your point about censorship, absolutely. And one of the proposals, and I think Doc's been part of this as well, this idea of middleware, which is, why can't I substitute my social media platform engine for what Zuckerberg thinks is best for me, right? Why can't I go find from a vast array of maybe new startup companies who want to build these decision engines for me? I just plug and play, make it modular. My AI helps control it for me, but then I get the feeds I want, whether it's news, social media, entertainment. It's based on what I want. And it's funny, I don't hear a lot of pushback on that. The one thing I do hear, some people say, well, you're creating your own little silo. It's you living your own little world. Yeah, maybe. But right now I'm living in Zuckerberg's little world. I'm living in the world he wants, right? And there's this notion that the web is one web. Every web experience is different based on what they think of us. So we don't all see the same web. We interact with 8 billion versions of it based on what they want. So I don't think giving more control back to us changes anything except gives us more control, and maybe in fact opens us up to new experiences because we're more trusting, because we are more in control of our environment.
We become more powerful in that model, and therefore less susceptible, hopefully, to bad actors. And
that's the theory. And again, bad actors will always be bad acting, and you can try to figure out what the constraints look like around that. Even being a fiduciary, right? The doctor is supposed to report if you've got a bad disease and you're not taking care of yourself, or you're out there spreading it. They have a right to go tell the health authorities. If a lawyer knows you're about to go kill somebody, they're supposed to report that. So there may be interesting ways where the fiduciary concept comes into play, where the societal element of trying to constrain some of the bad acts while still allowing optimal freedom for everybody else is sort of the way to go. So again, these are all things to be worked out over time, but at least we should be doing it and not the folks in Menlo Park.
Great. Okay. So look, we are Myra, you're going to get us back on schedule.
Yep.
What we have after after the public meeting, we have an after party, the Idea Exchange, where we take the guest speaker's topic and we expand upon it. So if we've not exhausted the conversation around Richard's talk. We can take that afterwards. And Richard, you're welcome to come join us
I
on
will.
that as you do, and we can dig further. I'm going to encourage everyone to join the inaugural meeting of the Glia network. I think it'd be good for us to show support and then figure out how we formally. I think we're going to join. Look, we're going to join, and then we're going to figure out what we do together. Fantastic, and thanks so much for including us. Great.
Thank
So,
you, Richard. Yep. Let's move on. Right, Reza? Let's go on to the work group updates.
Yeah, let's go to the work group updates.
Is Balaji or Cyan, are you guys on?
Yes. Thanks, Myra. Hope you guys can hear me. So this week the work group met and we were discussing how to scale the layers for the large language models to run and in a separate tier, so we can separate the GPU workloads versus the regular other types of OS workloads. And we are starting to move towards using an OpenAI compliant RESTful API way of accessing these language models. And that's where the team is exploring. And Cyan, if you want to update further on that.
Sure. We were working on the rack. We have finished the rack already. We used old Llama. We were trying to use Llama CPP, but instead we use old Llama because it is better for our use case. And I can show you guys the roadmap if you want, or I can share it in the general channel. But this week we're going to be working on integrating all the APIs that we have worked so far in the UI, so we have something that it actually works. And that's pretty much it.
Thanks so much, Sam. Let's see, is Sam still in Europe?
Still here.
There you go.
So I started the week joining their call and supporting the agent, the assistant team on some of the questions that they had about the integration between it and PyOS. They've submitted some pull requests in GitHub, which have got some quite interesting ideas. The channels is meant to have like an omni-channel approach, and that you're meant to register different components with a URI, like an endpoint, so you can tell kind of the ins and outs of the system. And they started to, the developers at Arcus Nexus, so Roy and Annie and Cyan and co, started to register things like a list of the files that were in the RAG database and so on. So I revisited that, and now I've kind of moved towards like a resource model, like clouds like Azure. And they were also doing things like they created a new schema for posting messages. So all of the messages that go to and from the end users were going to land in the OS as well, which is an interesting idea. It puts us in takes us out of the management plane, puts us in the data plane. So I need to think some more about that. But one of the things I've realized is that a lot of our customers, both personal and enterprise customers, are going to have data in Microsoft 365 and Azure. So the other thing that I've managed to squeeze in this week is doing like 80 hours of training for Microsoft Azure, and then doing 2 exams to get the Microsoft Azure Expert certification today. So you'll see a lot more of the kind of Azure-like approaches, and Azure is very similar to Google Cloud and AWS and so on as well. But because we're providing we're doing a fairly similar thing to something like Azure Portal, by being closer to it and having concepts like resources and resource groups and so on, it's going to allow us to integrate them. And while we will always support local LLMs and so on, I think that the default use cases for most users, who don't have high-end graphics cards in the machines, is going to be to use cloud services, and even LLMs like OpenAI and Claude and Grok and whatever else. So I think that's about it from me. We made some good progress, and we'll keep.
Thanks, Sam. Before we move on to the next topic, I just want to say that I think the assistant team put a call out for anyone that wants to participate in user interface design. They could use some help there or some critique of their existing UI design. Reach out to Cyan, reach out to Balaji, and see if you can help. Also, if you go through Cyan and Balaji, if you go through the introductions channel, that is where everyone's posted, hey, I'm a new member and here's my speciality. Just do a search for UX UI. I came across a number of people that are designers. Reach out to them, cold call them, and say, "Hey, we need your help." And I think that'll be powerful for including folks in there. And then
to say, Suniti is actually coming up with a questionnaire or like a little form, which will make it easier for everyone to fill out in the intro channel, to list their interests and you know, maybe what they're experts at.
Fantastic. Okay.
Reza, before you go on, I'm just going to add one more update as well. I'm going to put a link in the chat. I've got granted early access to GitHub models this week as well, which is kind of like their answer to Hugging Face. And so I've started to tinker with that, and look how we might integrate with that. And of course, being, you know, GitHub being a Microsoft property, that integrates directly with Azure. And if you do anything that goes beyond the free tier, then you know, it jumps straight into Azure.
Okay. Well, that's great. We've also had some inbound queries about data curation. There's a data curation kind of research project, but it might be something that we need to do for the beta to sanitize the data going into the RAG databases to ensure accuracy. So there's a conversation, and we might, I don't want to hold up the beta, but I'd like to have that research effort on the radar of the development team, so that we can quickly roll out some enhancement features later on. So there was that one, and I don't know if you've seen, there's one of our members, Jeff Kramer. He works for iBridge. He created a whole dashboard for onboarding new data into the RAG database. He was building it for the POC, so he was using that code base. But I'd like to get his efforts, Jeff's efforts, harnessed into what we're doing, and I think that'll be fantastic. Okay, so who's up next? I think it's Ryan.
I don't see Ryan.
We don't see Ryan. Okay, well, it's good. We can win back some time there. Okay. I did message him earlier on. He said he was up for giving an update, but he's not on the call. So that means more time for me to give you an update of what happened at AI 4. So let me share my screen, and I'm going to do a share via photos. Took a lot of pictures, and that'll remind me what we were doing. Okay, so let's see. Should be presenting. There we go. That's me, shiny and new. Just arrived Monday morning in Vegas at the AI4 conference, and a bit blurry there. The crowd started to come in. That was me going into the sort of networking reception. The previous year, that meeting was outside of this hall in kind of a hallway, but now it was filling up, and that's what it was at the height. It was a pretty full. The grand ballroom was full. So they say they had there we go. It was double the membership. It was a bit wild. You know what happens in Vegas apparently doesn't stay in Vegas.
What is that? I
don't know. It was some photo shoot opportunity there. I met lots of. It's interesting. The conference, which was about 2,000 members last year, 2,000 attendees, was 5,000 attendees this year. Still not so huge that you can't just bump into people and say, "Hey, let's have a conversation." I felt like we covered the whole conference. We were given 4 tickets. Kai Pham took one. Me, Samara took another. Toby took a ticket, didn't show up. But anyway, we had 3 of us covering the various sessions, and this fellow Jeff Easley, GM of Responsible AI Institute, another ally institution that we'll probably have them on as a guest speaker and figure out. We had a good conversation to figure out what the alignment was between the 2 organizations. Okay, so we met a bunch of people, spent some time with Kai. Kai had got us the ticket last year, and so this is the second AI4 conference that we attended. Gosh, okay, it went on. Okay, right. It was the following morning was the keynote speaker, and look at the crowd. It's huge. This was a small room before, and now they've got the whole grand ballroom, and it was full of folks. And keynote speaker, Jeff Hinton. Okay, so Jeff Hinton, godfather of AI, left Google a couple of years ago saying, hey, I think AI is heading in a dangerous direction. I'd like to leave and go and do something about it. And he also made some other promises or indications of what he wanted to do post Google, that he wanted to research alternate neural network frameworks, ones that could learn and think concurrently, also alternates to the perceptron, this basic component that's inside all neural networks, that component that was designed in 1942 and we still have it. So everyone, well, me at least, was expecting that Jeff Hinton would use this opportunity to give us an update of what he's been up to. No, sadly, this was a reprise of his 60 Minutes conversation report. He didn't report anything new. Frankly, my hero, it's tough to have heroes because you place them on ivory towers, you project upon them all your best aspirations, and then they disappoint you. And I saw my hero crumbling before me because he basically just dialed it in. I have to say. So I was disappointed, doubly disappointed when I heard from the organizers that they had to pay him $100,000 for that appearance. He took no meetings. I asked for a meeting. I got no response. So, gosh, Richard, that could be plan B. You know, if that'd be your retirement gig. Just go and do the speaking circuit. I don't know if you get that.
I'm way ahead of you, Reza. Yeah, I'm
right.
for it now. Make room in my capacious bank account for that.
There we go. So interesting and amusing interview with Andrew Yang. Andrew Yang talking about his political aspirations as well as AI. So I thought that was interesting. Let's go through this quickly. Oh, actually, one slide back. This was the education room, a room that was that they only put 20 seats out around this round table, and you can see the walls are lined with all these people who were specifically coming to talk about AI for education. And in this room were the CIOs of some of the top universities and colleges around the US, and Kwaai had an opportunity to stand up and invite them all to participate in the beta. So I've got the entire list of these folks, and there's lots of follow-up to basically seal the deal to get them to sign up. I think we're going to be way oversubscribed for our 30 beta institutions. So that's exciting. It's a lot of work. I've set a lot of expectation in their minds about us delivering something. I said in a month, but we're expecting internally to have some software by the end of this month. No pressure on the development team, but we have now got a pipeline of institutions that are looking forward to AI. Lots of interesting talks. I don't know if I'm going to go through this character over here, Torsten. We're going to invite him to become a guest speaker. Go and look at his presentation about ethics and morality in AI and how to actually compute it and quantify it. A tough problem, and he's tackling it. This guy's from Liquid AI. Interesting, different neural network approach, a state space Mamba-like approach. Very interesting, and he's probably one of the most advanced in the space. You're asking Torsten who? I wish I'd remembered his name. I will find it.
It's cool, no rush.
Yeah, Torsten GliaNet. Okay, so he is. I'll post the link in the channel. It's his speciality is on digital governance and cybersecurity, and he was also critical of Jeff Hinton's presentation. Okay, so look, we went through. This is important for the stuff that Daryl Sarant is researching. This is an indication that it's possible to develop networks that have what they call sub-quadratic scaling. The current neural networks that we know and love, the transformer and so on, they scale up quadratically, which is a big problem. So they scale in the number of layers, they scale by the context window as well. And so Kwaai is on the lookout for research and actualization in developments like Mamba and so on that give you the same sort of neural network, but it scales in a linear fashion or maybe an n log n fashion. This one, I think, scaled in a anyway. So we have folks within Kwaai that are keeping an eye on this space, and it's going to be very important for personal AI. And Doc, your complaint is the same complaint about Dave Grantham. These geniuses are just too handsome to. Okay, so election integrity was a big deal at the conference. Lots of talking heads talking about AI ethics, but really not offering solutions, simply posing the problem. Frankly, let's move the conversation along further, and I think that's what Kwaai is doing. We should always put ourselves in the position of not just whining and creating passive blog posts and so on. Let's show something. Let's show that we're doing something about it. And so all of these things are important. I then was invited to a VC get-together. Gosh, that was very interesting. Number of VCs, as soon as you say, hey, I'm a chair of a nonprofit, you can see that they look at their mobile phone and they move elsewhere. So I met a bunch of folks there, but H2O.ai is another organization we need to be looking at. I think the work that they're doing is very relevant to Kwaai. So have a look at H2O.ai. This is the character. I'm gonna flick through these really quickly. LotusPetal.ai. I thought this was going to be something to do with petals. No, it's nothing. This is just a startup that said nothing. They bought a spot there. They got their CEO to stand up, and he said nothing about what they were doing. So that was a waste of time. This was very interesting. This is a company called Samba Nova. If we're complaining about the industry's addiction to GPUs, Samba Nova is worth looking at. Silicon that implements inference at a fraction of the cost. GPUs are great for training neural networks. When you put them into production and you run inference and you want it to scale and you want it to be cost effective, GPUs are absolutely useless. They'll do the job, but they'll just cost you an arm and a leg. So Samba Nova are doing the same thing that I was doing at Real Networks, where I took a massive facial recognition stack, a face analytics stack, and took it out of the cloud running on GPUs and got it to run on embedded silicon that cost like $1 or $2. So it's possible to do, and it's a massive industry con that we have to run our inference in the clouds of the oligopoly. Apologies for the emotive language. Have a look at Samba Nova. We're going to have them on a call as a guest speaker on the weekly public meeting. Okay, we're running out of time. I'm gonna flick through a few things. These are interesting. I'll report on these later on. USC have also produced an AI for EDU, and of course they go straight into it and they say, well, I actually didn't have their price sheet. Where's their price sheet? Did they put it up? No, they had their. Okay, for some reason, I don't have the photo of that, but there was a price sheet, and it's a $50 a seat price tag. It didn't look much different to what we're doing. It's. I don't think they've got any code running. I think this is just a pitch they put forward. But it's an interesting data point that a lot of analysts and a lot of players in the space are eyeing education as a vertical to disrupt. We're approaching it from a non-profit point of view. Many are approaching it from the classic for-profit point of view. Okay, so education was a huge theme in here. Here's me exiting. Okay, you might not recognize this character, Chris Ye. Chris Ye is partners with Reid Hoffman. Reid Hoffman, the inventor of LinkedIn. I met Chris at the VC get together, and I said, "Hey, I'm leading a nonprofit." He said, "I want to hear more about it." So he's a VC, and then he found me at another sort of the closing session. He found me and spent time talking with me. He then said, "Hey, when are you leaving?" I said, "I got an 8 o'clock flight." He said, "So have I. Let's take an Uber together." So I ordered an Uber. Teslas are Ubers now. Gosh. And he gave me a signed copy of his book, Blitzscaling. Okay, so I had a copy already. I'm that kind of guy. I read books, and he gave me a signed copy. And he said, "What are you doing next Thursday?" I'm coming to LA, and so we've got a breakfast meeting, and that was our beach trip. So I did some watercolor painting on the beach trip. But okay, so there we go. So look, it was a very valuable conference, and it was we'll definitely return next year, and we'll be there, and we'll be up on stage. Okay, so we've got 5 minutes. Maybe if there's some new voices, we can hear from them.
Yes, please, quickly. I'd love to hear from some new member voices too.
So hands up, or Myra's going to call on you. Gosh, everyone's so quiet. Everyone's shy. Did we hear from Anil Augustine? Looks like a new. There's Isam. Excellent. Go for it.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for the invitation for this Kwaai Community Day talk. I'm Ihsan Gökalp. I'm a software engineering fellow for this summer for an online head start for a program. So I'm working with big LLM APIs and building projects with them with basic web development tech stacks like React and Node.js technologies. I'm currently looking for a startup in the industry to help them build a feature that is at their backlog as my final project for this fellowship. With listening to today's community discussion and what's learning more about the cause, I would love to help the cause of Kwaai, but just building it like a tech feature that's not implemented, that's kind of at the backlog. Thanks for the opportunity again. Yeah, that's kind of why I'm here, and would love to be a part of this cause.
Fantastic. Okay, so Balaji and Sam, you heard, you've got an eager volunteer here. Take him up on it and find him some meaty project to take from the backlog. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
Okay. I see some new names that I've not seen. Christian Noriega. No, you're not going to speak? Okay.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, there we
Hi,
go.
how are you? I'm Christian. I study at Montclair City University, data science. I just heard about this project this week, so this is my first meeting, joining and learning about this.
Fantastic.
And
well, welcome aboard.
thank you.
Okay, so if you've got Slack access, then go have a look, explore Slack. The channel that is worth looking at is the introductions channel. Go to the canvas in the introductions channel. It's in the top right-hand corner of the screen, and that gives you the link to all the meetings, all the work groups, everything you want, and then don't be afraid to insert yourself in the conversation and ask questions. Great.
Sure.
Myra, I want to post the link to the after party, and that's good. Any newcomers, any other newcomers who want to speak before we move on? Upcoming speakers, let me just give you a note. We've got Rafi Krikorian of the Emerson Collective. We haven't locked down a date for him. It's either going to be next week or the week after. Emerson Collective, you might know, is the foundation that is run by Steve Jobs' widow. So ongoing conversations, Scott Glosserman and Rika Nakazawa. Scott Glosserman from Gather. Gather was one of the startups that I helped when I was running a venture studio a while back. And so he'll tell you what Gather is all about. Their ethos of sort of crowdsourcing audiences is in alignment with the sort of thing that we're doing. So Rika Nakazawa is from NTT. NTT, the sort of global company, the holding company that includes NTT Data and so on. I've known her for many years. She's now in a very senior position. And we were on a call yesterday talking about bringing AI to the edge and how NTT could be part of that, or how what we want to do aligns with what they want to do. So Rika will come on in September. Obviously, many of the folks that I met at the conference, I'll be inviting. So we're probably going to fill up our dance card all the way through September and October. If you have interesting speakers that you think we should invite, let us know. Okay, Myra, I'll hand back to you.
Yep. So I did post a link for the after party. Please come and join. This is one of my favorite meetings just because we get to talk about anything, everything on your mind in the world, anything we want to pursue. So link is there. Come join us. Thank you, Reza, for another great Kwaai Day Friday.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. Keep well.
Thank you.
Well,
Hello. Yes.
Dana, how are you today?
I'm great, Dana. Give me a moment to log out of a meeting, please.